Southwest flight staff tells mom to leave plane, then she gets bad news. People are escorted from planes all the time, so common that people don't stress about it anymore. Some are rude, some are dangerous, while some passengers just have bad luck. Regardless of the reason, it's still embarrassing. This is something that Peggy Yule got to experience. She was at Chicago's Midway International Airport and she just turned off her phone because she was ready to board the plane. However, she had no idea at the time that she won't fly with this plane. Here is why Peggy was asked to leave the plane. What happened to her led to numerous other actions that were shocking. Peggy Yule did everything that a good passenger would do. She did her check-in on time, turned off her phone before the flight, and waited peacefully in line. At the time, she had no idea that she would be asked to leave the plane. Everything seemed normal, and there were no clues that she will regret her flight. Again, it is not unusual for people to be asked to leave the plane. Some people become so nervous that they insist on leaving the plane. However, for the majority of people, flying is nothing than a pleasant experience. Unfortunately, Peggy Yule didn't get the time to enjoy her flight. Life had other plans for her, and she was about to experience tremendous stress. If anything, Peggy Yule was one of those people who always know what to do in a specific situation. Simply said, she was great at following rules. So she turned off her phone, fastened her seatbelt, got sure that her seat was upright, and that all of her personal belongings were placed away correctly. She did what any other passenger would do. Still, she was asked to leave the plane. So what happened? Did you know traveling from Chicago to Cleveland by car takes 6 hours? That's why so many people choose to cross this 350-mile distance by flying. Peggy was one of those passengers who wanted to save time by flying just an hour. However, her plan didn't go as intended. She was one step away from the disaster. When the passengers board in, everyone wants just one thing: to take off as soon as possible. However, this plane scheduled from Chicago to Cleveland had a different plan. It stopped at the same place where it started. This move was unexpected, and people were shocked and a bit scared. Then a flight attendant approached Yule. Everyone was confused when the plane stopped. Moreover, everyone was looking at Peggy as the flight attendant looked at her and walked her direction. People are so known nowadays that they know when a plane stops, something is wrong. Peggy was looking at the flight attendant as well, and she was thinking, am I on the wrong plane? Yule had one plan on that fateful day in May 2015, to reach her destination. However, that day didn't go as planned. Peggy believed that she is in the wrong place. After all, Chicago was famous for unusual airport situations. Soon it was clear that there were more significant issues than that. Distancing people from the planes is not an uncommon practice, especially in Chicago-related flights. In 2017, David Dao Doi An, a Vietnamese-American doctor, was by force removed from a United Airlines flight. What was the issue? The airline staff needed to get to Louisville, and no one was willing to offer up 4 seats, so the passengers had to be forced to leave the plane. The airline company had to choose randomly 4 passengers and remove them from the plane. Unfortunately, David was one of them. Surprisingly, 3 of the passengers accepted their fate quickly. However, David didn't want to get off the plane. The airplane representatives note that David was belligerent and disruptive. Shocking, the passengers had a different story. David is by profession a pulmonologist, and he was heading to Louisville for his work. Missing the flight wasn't an option for him. In the meantime, passengers filmed the entire situation with David. A passenger filmed how rough the police was with David. David's face was against an armrest, and he was pulled by his arm off the plane. For this mistreatment, David agreed on a settlement with the company. It's not uncommon for companies to remove passengers because they have an in-house emergency. Flight attendants always have an advantage opposite to regular passengers. However, in some situations, passengers have been removed for their notorious behavior. For example, in an episode on a Southwest Airlines flight from Chicago to Houston in October 2018, one female passenger became difficult after a flight attendant asked her to fold up her table for liftoff. According to the passengers, an unknown woman becomes cranky when the airline staff members asked her to fold her table. She refused to do so and became verbally abusive. Because of this, the pilot taxied the airplane back to the departure gate. The woman was escorted from the plane while she launched a series of racial words toward the airline staff. This made this situation even more enjoyable. Passengers are removed for many reasons. This often happens in any size company. However, it turns out that it's not always a passenger's fault. A flight from Sacramento, California to Austin, Texas that took place in May 2019 is known as the vodka case. Here's what happened on this flight and why humor is not always welcome. On this specific flight, regular action turned into the hours-long delayed flight. The airline staff started serving water, and one of the passengers made a joke to light the situation. It was a wrong move. The flight attendant hated the joke, and one of the passengers, Peter Uzelac, witnessed the whole event. He said how he and his wife talked with the flight attendant and told her that even they are restless to long waiting hours. She replied, "Well, so have I, so get used to it." Then she made a call. She called someone and the airplane simply returned to the gate. That same moment, the man was removed by Sacramento County Sheriff officers. Southwest Airlines never made an official apology, but they did issue a statement, and the case was forgotten. Even now, people believe that man was wrongfully removed and that everything was blown out of proportion. A few weeks before Peggy Yule had to leave the plane, another situation happened. One of the Southwest Airline passengers blamed the company for a rather unpleasant experience. The passenger claimed that the company prevented her from contacting her husband. She received a rather disturbing message from him and wanted to talk with him. Karen Momsen Evers from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, received an alarming message from her husband. He said that he plans to take his own life. She answered him before the flight from New Orleans, but later on asked the staff member to make an emergency phone call. Regardless of her reason, the crew insisted that Karen set her phone to flight mode. She then asked another crew member if she could make the call, but she also got a no for an answer. Karen had no choice but to sit still and wait to reach her destination. Her first move was to run to her husband. However, before she could run to her loved one, she was stopped by the police. Sadly, Karen received the news from the police that her husband committed suicide. Southwest Airlines insisted that their routine includes informing the pilots of an emergency situation. Unfortunately, that didn't happen this time. So, was there a tragedy preparing to meet Peggy as well? Or was she simply on the wrong plane? So what did Peggy do that made the flight attendant approach her? Why did the plane return to the departure gate? Was she on the wrong flight? Had she offended a crew member? It turns out that she did neither of these things, and she was about to hear some shocking news. Peggy didn't have any special requests, but there was an emergency happening that she wasn't aware of at the time. Now she was about to discover what was happening. As you already know, Peggy turned off her phone. While she was waiting for her plane to take off, the flight attendant had some instructions for her. No, Peggy wasn't on the wrong flight, but someone was desperately trying to contact her. Peggy's husband was desperately trying to reach his wife. He was so desperate to talk with her that he was forced to find another way to contact her. The only way for him to get to his wife on the plane was to contact the airline. The airline told him that they would pass on his message. Because the situation was severe, the airline promised to deliver the husband's message to Peggy. At the same time, the pilot was already headed to the runway. The flight attendant told Peggy that there's a family emergency and she must leave the plane. Peggy asked what happened, but the flight attendant couldn't tell her anything else. Peggy had one thing to do now. Peggy called her husband immediately, and he had some devastating news for her. Her son was in a coma because he suffered a head injury. At this moment, Peggy was in Chicago and her son miles away in Denver. She had to get to her son, but at that moment she had no idea how she would organize everything. Surprisingly, someone already thought about everything. Peggy was devastated because of her son. Now, in the moment of her despair, she had to think about logistics as well. She had no idea how she would pay for a new flight from Chicago to Denver. However, Southwestern Airlines had a solution. The company was already one step ahead of her and they made some plans. The gate attendant already knew about the situation and booked her a direct flight to Denver. She just had to wait for 2 hours. Peggy shared how Southwest Airlines did everything for her. She was offered a private waiting area, her luggage was rerouted, and she was allowed to board first. They even packed her lunch to have a bite when she gets off the plane in Denver. She didn't have to do anything because the airline did the entire work for her. Peggy was only thinking about her son, so she couldn't wait to reach Denver so she could go to the hospital and meet him. Not only that, the company organized her free flight and lunch, but they went a step further. Her luggage was delivered to where she was staying, and the company even called in to ask how her son was. However, that wasn't all, and they had more planned. Peggy was with her son, and at that moment, she wasn't thinking about travel expenses. She was ready to pay them, but now she had more important things on her mind. Then she received a new surprise. Peggy received another call from the company. It was regarding her travel expenses. During that conversation, she discovered that Southwest actually won't charge the flight. Since Peggy and her family were in this ungrateful situation, saving every dollar meant a lot. She had no words to express just how thankful she was. But what happened with her son? Peggy's son went through severe head trauma. However, he did manage to overcome this difficult situation, and he was soon on the mend. Even in those good moments, the airline didn't forget Peggy. They regularly called for an update on her son's health. She was happy to share the good news with them. Peggy was more than excited to share her happiness with the airline. Over and over again, she thanked them for their support and help along the way. Even today, a couple of years later, Peggy has only kind words for the Southwest Airlines. She will always remember how kind the company was toward her and how much they helped her. This proves that some companies do care about their customers.